Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast, Mayday, what's your location? Get the panel out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, I need water in that 2.5 inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5 inch line. To the rope, to the rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we explore firefighter line of duty deaths and the circumstances surround them from official reports and media. This is episode number 68 of our 4th season. This week I'm joined by my guest host, Denis. All our other hosts were busy. So it's the Waldorf and Statler show again, the two old guys in the balcony. This week, we explore the recent tragic death of firefighter Jared Lloyd of the Rockland, New York Fire Department. Firefighter Lloyd died in March of 2021 when a local assisted living facility caught fire, forcing the evacuation of 117 residents and staff into the winter night. Firefighter Lloyd died while he and his rescue team were removing a trapped victim from the 3rd floor suite, both running low out of air. His partner was rescued by a RIT or FAST team, but he was not found in time before the building partially collapsed. Warning, this is a long episode as podcasts go, reviewing a significant complex fire that lasted 40 hours requiring dozens of mutual aid resources. But it's a podcast. You can stop and restart anytime. I hope you enjoy the episode. The responders in command were faced with one of the most complex emergencies that we all dread, working a fire in a partially sprinklered assisted living facility in the middle of the night in winter. It was quite interesting to read how they handled it and what they did. Please listen and learn about this incident. We could all face this in our communities. Now, let me bring in Denis. Hello, Denis. How are you doing today?
Very good, Paul. It's the Waldorf show. No, it's the Statler and Waldorf show.
Statler and Waldorf, the two old guys that have time to record. Yep.
We'll have to decide which one's which.
We will. I don't know which one's which in the show, so.
Are you the one on the right or the one on the left?
Exactly. I don't know. I got hair. Well, you got some hair.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Ooh. Here we go.
Well, welcome back. Things warming up there in Nova Scotia?
Yes. You mentioned last time we were talking that you had a sudden break in the weather in Alberta and it popped above zero. Well, it popped above zero here a couple days later, and I appreciate that very much, and thank you. Send more.
Yeah, we sent it east. Yep. Awesome.
Great. But now the typical is about to happen. Tomorrow night there's a rain warning. They're expecting up to 90 millimeters of rain. So that would be the equivalent of 3 feet of snow. Yeah. And the ground is frozen, and it's not just frozen. There's ice on top of it, and the snow in the ditches are actually ice. So this is one of the times I remind my wife, and she always goes, "Oh, rain, flooding." I says, "Dear, we live on top of a hill, which we do."
Luckily.
If it's flooding here, it's very bad lower down. So,
wow, yeah, my sister-in-law is experiencing flooding in eastern Oregon. Apparently they got a bunch of snow and warm weather, and everything's flooding, and they're moving cows and all that kind of stuff.
Is she in the mountains or out in the plains?
Just sort of in the desert, kind of high desert near Boise, Idaho.
Right, right.
Yeah, they're getting flooding, and we're supposed to get some snow again starting Monday.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not complaining because I think that maybe just somebody's lifted the skirt and I can see spring coming. So
there you go. Exactly.
That's good. Yeah. It can't come soon enough. I got new tires for my motorcycle. They're sitting in the garage. I got to take my wheels off, which is no small thing on a 40-year-old Goldwing. You can't even see the wheels, let alone get to them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's a job.
You used to have a trick for doing that on my Valkyrie. I can't remember what it was now, but there was a trick to get the axle off without taking the side boxes off.
Yeah, the main trick's to get it up in the air and to wear gloves because you're going to lose some skin. Just saying.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to Arizona, go motorcycling next week, so
Yeah, I heard about
we've
that.
rented some bikes, and me and three other
Yeah,
guys are going to ride around
yeah.
in
I don't know
Arizona
why I'm
for.
wasting my time talking to you today. So,
Yeah, you should
'cause I'm
come to
pissed.
Arizona.
Yeah, I'm pissed at you.
Oh well, I'll send you a note from AZ next week.
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay, let's see. FDNY tips book. We've talked about this before, where they've developed a book of a whole bunch of tips, and so this is tip number 9 of 2023. Recently, units in the Bronx operated at a third alarm fire, which spread from the second floor to the cock loft, or in Canada, attic space of a 4-story, 35 by 75 multiple family dwelling. Heavy fire had extended through most of the the cockloft nozzle, so a piercing nozzle basically, or making a hole and putting Bresnan or distributor nozzle through the hole to suppress the fire. It says here the cockloft nozzle is one of FDNY's most effective tools, considering the following points regarding cockloft nozzle operations. Now, the difference here, and Denis, you can back us up here. So, a cockloft nozzle or a Bresnan nozzle or a cellar nozzle actually spins to distribute larger water droplets versus a piercing nozzle, which just sprays out fine water droplets, right? Go for it.
Yeah, that generally speaking, I think that's accurate, but it's not strictly speaking accurate because there's a number of different versions. I think the original Bresnan nozzle was a series of smoothbore nozzles,
Okay.
and I've seen versions out there. In fact, I've owned versions out there that are also quite old, and where all the little nozzle tips were actually equipped with fog tips on them, and they actually sprayed a fine spray while they were rotating. And so there's those and the smooth bores. They're also available in an 1.5 inch connection size and a 2.5 inch connection size. And I will tell everybody out there, from my personal opinion and my testing of all of these things, if you own an 1.5 inch one, sell it for brass. That's worth more. If you own one with the fog tips on it, sell that one for brass. It's worth more. And keep the one with the smoothbore nozzles on it, and keep it maintained so that it spins readily. And there's versions out there too where you hook the hose directly onto the nozzle and then drop the hose and the nozzle down through the hole. Don't buy those. Buy the ones that actually have the applicator on it. So there's a 90-degree bend and it comes back. There's a set of legs that you fold out that support it. So then you can chop a 1x1 hole or whatever the case may be and drop it down in. Usually it projects in about a couple feet. And then your hose is nice and safely up above. And it's all metal and water down below. And they work really good. And they spin really fast and they can deliver a significant amount of water. So yeah, they're not all the same, just saying.
So in this tip, it says consider the following points regarding cockloft nozzle operations. To be most effective, the nozzle must be considered as an offensive tactic and deployed early in the operations. At top floor fires, consideration should be given to preemptively using the cockloft nozzle from the roof or the interior whenever fire is suspected of entry into the cockloft area. The cockloft nozzle is generally placed into operation on the top floor of a building for use in the cockloft area above the ceiling. It may also be lowered into the cockloft from the roof of the building when the roof is deemed safe to operate on, although if the fire is below you, that's always the question there. Positioning it on the roof versus interior is dependent on several circumstances, of course. It's particularly useful when there's high ceilings or difficult ceilings to pull. Operating from the roof may sometimes provide the opportunity for a quicker stretch and safer operation at a residential building fire, depending on the existing conditions. However, the cockloft nozzle can be added to a hand line that's already positioned on the top floor, allowing water to be quickly applied to the space. Ideally, when operating from the roof, members should begin nozzle operation from an inspection hole where the fire is not venting and move towards the area of origin as conditions permit. So, just a little brief tip there from the FDNY on cockloft or attic fires and closed space fires to think about.
And as usual, don't invent it on the day you have a fire and you remember the nozzle.
Yeah, you got to use it. You got to try it out.
Practice,
Yeah,
practice, practice.
practice. Okay, some current event apparatus market concerns. Several people are displaying concerns. There's fewer independent suppliers, especially the custom chassis suppliers, which are often considered single source vendors. One company now actually owns 5 of the 10 custom chassis builders in North America, and they're potentially bidding against each other on same projects. So some people are wondering if that's one of the factors in the shortage of fire apparatus and the price increases of fire apparatus in the industry. Although the industry did go through a big downsizing in '08, and I don't think it ever recovered from that. And then 2019, and so we're still suffering the echo effects from the COVID and everything else.
Well, certainly, the companies that were purchased by this group who's bought them, those companies weren't as profitable as they wanted them to be. And I'm sure that when they bought them, the intention was to make them profitable. So one of
Yep.
the ways you make them profitable is to cut costs. And you do that by commonality of parts and systems and by reducing the workforce and reducing the number of facilities. The other way you make them more profitable is by making the price higher. And if you own a significant segment of the market, I think you have a much bigger influence on what the prices are going to be.
Yep. That's we're seeing more and more of that, whether it's in fire trucks or in social media companies or digital information companies,
Right.
where they're getting huge.
So how much longer before they start majorly sourcing their fire truck components offshore? I mean, I already know one company that I was approached by to look at importing fire trucks made in India and
Oh yeah.
bringing them onshore. They just, were substantially cheaper than vehicles that are made in North America. And I think you're going to see more and more of that. And that's going to force the domestic producers, American, U.S. domestic producers, into being more competitive with those folks. And so more and more stuff's going to go offshore. And it's going to be just like the auto industry, right? It's going to,
Yep. Parts made
well,
all over the place. Yep.
yeah. I'm about to get into politics, so I'll pull my,
No, we'll stay out of that. Two
yep.
Spokane, Washington rigs crashed on the way to the same call on an icy hill. One crashed into a house and the other into some parked vehicles. There were no injuries, fortunately, but winter time, responding over a hill to a call and then, can't stop. And no injuries, although the one truck was totaled, the one that hit the house. So I think they're going to be waiting for a new rig.
Wow. Can you imagine sitting in the front seat with a big windshield watching that come at you?
No, I can't. There was one in Oak Bay on Vancouver Island where the driver had a medical emergency and lost control on the way to a call, and the officer undid his seatbelt, reached across, and pulled the park brake to stop the truck as it went through a yard and missed a tree and hit a house. It didn't have the center mounted park brake switch. He had to reach over and grab it under the dash. And that was about 5 years ago. I remember reading about that. I think we talked about it on the podcast.
Yes, and that's why I always spec the parking brake in the center console.
Yeah, so the officer can grab it. Exactly. Missouri fire apparatus was trapped at an industrial fire after a high level conveyor belt that was on fire. The system collapsed and trapped the fire truck in the plant area. Luckily, I didn't read of any injuries, but they were kind of stuck when their truck got destroyed by this collapsing piece of industrial equipment over their heads.
Of course, that can happen, if you take your truck down in a blind alleyway because you want to get on the Charlie side of an incident of buildings, right? You can get trapped back there.
For
And in
sure.
fact, one of our podcasts, just
Yep.
a couple of podcasts ago,
Mm-hmm.
they were on the Delta side in the alleyway, and the side of the building landed on the truck and killed one of the firefighters, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. Yep.
So it can happen. Just
Yeah.
saying.
The anniversary of the Station nightclub fire, while we're recording this, was just a day or two ago. That happened in 2003, Rhode Island, where 100 people died and 200 people were injured. Fire and building codes were violated, which is a looming risk as there's a pressure on our code making agencies or our municipalities to weaken codes presently in government circles. The state and the town were actually instructed in the aftermath to pay $10 million each to settlement to survivors. This covers the former fire marshal who was cited for failing to cite the club for the foam sound abatement materials on the walls, although a grand jury failed to indict him, but the settlement had to cover that, and a police officer for overlooking the overcrowding, and building code officials for failing to enforce code. So these are the results of inadequate codes or failing to enforce codes, not only it potentially kills firefighters, but obviously hundreds of people were killed in this nightclub. So I read the book about it. I can't remember what it's called. It was really good.
Yeah, and the source of the fire was pyrotechnics by the band on stage, and here in Canada, anyways, pyrotechnics and fireworks all fall underneath what's called the Explosives Act, and you're not allowed to set off fireworks or pyrotechnics without having a license to do so. So you need to have a licensed technician involved, and certainly municipalities have the ability to write bylaws around pyrotechnics. And we had very strict bylaws in the last job I was in, actually, the job before that too, where pyrotechnics were just plain not permitted without a permit. And we would, be involved in making sure that the fireworks were small enough, and the fact that they were safe. So a lot of places, are doing this stuff without telling you. And it's really, you need to be on top of these things if you can be, because if you've ever seen the videos of this fire,
Yep.
oh my,
Yeah,
there's
there's
no time to get out.
excellent videos on YouTube and stuff about it.
Yeah, and the
They,
firsthand experience, that's the interviews that tell you about it, like you said, the book and stuff, and
mhm.
it scares you.
It is. It was hard to finish.
I can't imagine what it was like to be a firefighter there.
No, no. Fire station collapsed in New York State yesterday, 2 days ago. Snow on the roof. They were clearing, but at the time, but the building collapsed during the snow clearing. I didn't read of any injuries, luckily, which was good. And then a parking garage actually collapsed today in Ottawa, potentially due to excessive snow load. Also, in the case of the parking garage, it appears that they were piling all the snow into one section of the upper level, which then collapsed onto the ground. And it just happened today. We don't have any reports
And
of
this is a
injuries.
reinforced concrete building.
Yeah, it's impressive to watch on YouTube, and wow, it would have been very scary to be there. And then another recent tragic incident in Nova Scotia, where a responding fire apparatus struck and killed the victim of a snowmobile accident that they were responding to. So as they arrived on scene, there was some sort of a problem, and the fire apparatus actually struck the victim that was, I suspect, lying on the ground getting treatment. So we'll hear more about that one, but very, very tragic. This week's episode is not very old, only a few years ago. Just got the report out recently here. On March 23rd of 2021, a 35-year-old volunteer firefighter died after becoming trapped while operating at a structure fire in an assisted living facility. Many firefighters' worst nightmare, a fire at a nursing home or assisted living. I know there was one in Alberta here a couple of years ago in St. Albert, and resources from all over had to come in, and fortunately they were able to take care of all the people and get them out, but never a good day. There was one in Riviere de Loup or something, Quebec, about 10 years ago that didn't go very well, if I remember correctly. Denis, I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, it was very serious. It was, I think, one wing of the building burned, and it was
Mm-hmm.
a volunteer fire department, and they couldn't get enough staff on scene soon enough to deal with a fast moving fire. And I believe it was a timber structure building, old
Yeah,
wooden frame, and it was bad news.
and there was
And
issues about mutual aid as well, if I recall correctly, with
yeah,
that. Yep.
yeah, I believe that was a wintertime fire actually at
Yeah,
that time.
exactly.
And really, this was an issue in the around the 2010s in Ontario, where there was I think 3 or 4 care home fires and multiple fatalities involved, and it changed the law in Ontario, and they brought in actually they created an act to deal with fire safety and qualifications of staff and a lot of different aspects for care homes, and it changed everything. But a lot of deaths to make that
Unfortunately, these
happen.
things have to happen before we change the
Yeah,
rules. And
predictable,
now
but
there's
apparently not predictable enough to change things.
predictable but not preventable. Yep. Okay, the community. Rockland County is the southernmost county in New York State on the west shore of the Hudson River across from New York City. It's part of the New York metropolitan area with a population of about 340,000 as of 2020. The state's third most densely populated county outside of New York City. So it's a fairly densely populated area. The county contains 5 towns and 18 incorporated villages and 8 hamlets.
It's a beautiful spot. It's really
Yeah, it's a
nice.
beautiful area. I remember flying
Yeah,
in to New York and then driving down New Jersey and driving through here, and it's a gorgeous area. And
yeah,
the towns on top of towns on top of towns, right? It's just all
yeah,
grown up together, and there's
yeah,
lots of independent fire companies and communities.
yeah, yeah. It's a fun place to motorcycle too, and it's a
Yes,
wonderful place to take a boat trip up the river too, the Hudson. So
right. Yeah, you and I have both been on a boat down the Hudson, although I don't really remember much of it because I was pretty young. Yeah. The county has the largest Jewish population of any U.S. county at 31.4%, or 90,000 residents. The county has the 80th highest household income in the U.S. as of 2010. In case some of our listeners has not been to rural eastern United States or Canada, from perspective of the fire service, these are vast suburban areas of villages and towns with multiple very large volunteer fire companies serving the communities. This has grown up over the past couple hundred years and modernized, many of which are sort of under quasi-regional control. The fire department in this case, Fire Department 17, is comprised of 3 fire companies in 4 firehouses with 120 members. So we're talking big volunteer fire departments. There's a hook and ladder company, Station 17. There's another hook and ladder company at Station 17. It's called 101 versus 100. There's Columbian Fire Engine Company, which is Station 17103, and East Village Station 17104. So they have independent designators of 4 different fire companies only in 3 stations. So you actually have 2 different organizations in the same building. It kind of blows the mind of the Western Canadian in me for how things are organized out west here.
typical East Coast.
Yeah, typical Eastern Canadian, Eastern Canadian and United States.
Yeah,
Fire
particularly the
department,
Northeast U.S. Yeah,
yeah, Northeast, yeah. Fire Department 17 serves a population of about 33,000 in an area of approximately 2.5 square miles. So the Fire Department 17 responds to about 1,200 incidents annually and does not provide EMS. The Volunteer Fire Department operates 13 pieces of apparatus. This includes 3 engine companies and 1 engine tanker, 2 ladder companies, 1 rescue engine, a light rescue, a cascade vehicle, a transport van, and 3 chief vehicles. The Volunteer Fire Department's leadership structure for firefighters includes a chief of department, a deputy chief, battalion chief, 3 captains, 8 lieutenants, 4 safety officers, an infection control officer. The volunteer fire department also includes fire police officers, which we could spend a moment on that, which are led by a captain and 2 lieutenants. So very common in northeastern United States is fire police, and these are firefighters that are focused on road safety, traffic control, that kind of stuff. They actually have the powers of what we would call in Western Canada a peace officer, and they can, have relieve the actual police from those duties at emergency events and incidents and special events, parades, etc.
yeah. The reason they're there from a traffic control point of view is, and I know a lot of firefighters out there, um, in a lot of jurisdictions, they do traffic control. They'll stand on the
Yep.
side of the road and direct traffic and stop traffic and so forth. And largely, that's illegal. You have no powers to do that. You are not a peace officer. You do not have the authority to actually do that. Now, generally, the public respects that, granted, but if something happens, there's an issue. So that's why they created fire police, because fire police have the ability to actually do that. They are authorized to do that legally. So that's why they exist. One of the reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Additionally, the fire department, and also to utilize resources effectively rather than having your 1001 level 2, whatever, certified active young firefighters standing on the road for 4 hours, preventing people from driving over the hose. They'll give that kind of role to an older member like myself or something that might go
Statler and
and do
Waldorf,
that.
yeah.
Statler and Waldorf to close the road and get abuse by the citizens who can't go to where they
Yeah.
want to go. Yeah,
Yeah, because Lord knows we're good for standing on the road
that,
for hours and hours.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, because we're not good for crawling through the building anymore.
Oh yeah.
And
Well, in my mind, I am.
yeah, in your additionally, Fire Department 17 maintains a certified FAST, or which provides immediate assistance and rescuing firefighters who are lost, missing, trapped, or in an incident. So they do have departments, separate departments in these areas that have FAST teams that would be dispatched regionally as mutual aid to serve as what we would call RIT or RIT teams. The volunteer fire department has one set of written policies and procedures that govern all fire companies. Policies and procedures provide direction for fireground operations, personnel accountability system, safety health requirements, medical examination policies. However, each of the three companies maintain their own bylaws, which are compatible with the overall fire department bylaws. The bylaws direct the operation of fire companies as well as provide procedures for new members and the annual selection of fire officers.
Great, Paul. We're going to talk a little bit about the training, education, and PD, professional development of the volunteer firefighters in Fire Department 17. So they're probably called Fire Department 17 because they're part of a larger dispatch area, right? So
Yep.
that's kind of some code there. I don't know if we talk about that later. I didn't come across it, but anyway. So the state of New York has no mandatory minimum training requirements to become a volunteer firefighter. That seems to be a common theme. You may have noticed in our podcast, there is no minimum standard.
And our
I'm
podcasts are
certain.
about line of duty deaths, and the common theme is no training requirements. Okay.
I can't talk too loud because I'm in a place now that's like that. Anyway,
Alberta, too.
yeah. However, the volunteer fire department in this particular incident maintains written policies and procedures, therein listing their minimum training requirements by assigning specific courses for each position. So they recognize that different firefighters do different jobs and you got to be trained to those jobs. So that's a fire department policy. So each position incorporates and builds upon training requirements of the previous position in a manner consistent with a tiered system. So like, I'll give you an example. Like your 1001 level 1, then you become certified or trained to 1001 level 2. So that's a tier you've stepped up. And after that, probably stepping into officer or specialty stuff. So all training courses required by the policies and procedures can be completed at the fire academy within the county where the volunteer fire department is located. So we're going to talk now about position or functional training requirements. So as an exterior firefighter, which is one of the positions, you'll have scene support operations and then proper radio procedures. As an interior firefighter, you're NFPA 1001. Then you've got basic first aid on top of that, hazmat awareness, ICS 100 and ICS 700, self-contained breathing apparatus confidence course. Can't say enough about those types of courses. They're
That's
really
why
good.
that's why I left them in here to point out to everybody that those
Yeah.
specialty courses on SCBA and firefighter survival are so important.
Yeah. And in fact, when I did these courses, we didn't call them confidence courses. We called them SCBA survival courses, which was a far more appropriate name
Yeah.
because there were sometimes we would carry people off of the fire ground. So anyway, never mind. Especially us young guys like me.
Yeah, exactly.
Firefighter survival and bailouts. Now we've talked about this firefighter survival and bailouts in a previous podcast, Paul, about how important that is.
Yep.
Having confidence in yourself and your stuff in your head that helps you make the right decisions, right?
Yeah, that the Lyle Carruthers or whatever, the guy from Winnipeg who bailed out the window, he credits that course with giving him the wherewithal and the thought processes to handle his emergency.
Yeah, and some of the LODDs, it's been clear that ability was missing in some of the victims, unfortunately. So anyway, if you're a driver operator in this department, you had NFPA 1002, which is the driver operator professional qualifications. Then you had EVOC. Help me out there, Paul. I'm not sure what that is.
Emergency vehicle operating course.
Okay.
Skid control and changing lanes
Right.
and defensive driving, that kind of stuff.
Right. We used to call that PDIC, Professional Driver Improvement Course.
Very similar.
Yeah, and highway safety for emergency responders. So that I'm not sure what's all in that course, but that can include things like properly flagging and traffic control and warning ahead of incidents.
That's from
and all
that
that stuff.
all online highway traffic safety program you can take, and a whole bunch of online courses and get certified in highway traffic safety for emergency responders specifically. So it's not your flagman course; it's made for how to block a road, etc.
Yeah. Here in Nova Scotia, there's a course that was developed probably more than 20 years ago, and requirements, and it's required as a fire department to follow these procedures. It's not, it's standard, practice here in Nova Scotia. So if you're a lieutenant, then you studied fire incident reporting, which would be very department specific, I'm sure, as well as standardized. Thermal imaging, dealing with ticks, basic structural collapse, accident victim extrication, hazmat operations. So that's operations level hazmat. Hazmat awareness was your interior firefighters. As lieutenant, you also did confined space awareness, and then you did engine company operations, truck company operations, and introduction to fire officer. So that'd be fire officer level 1, basically.
Like
So
1021.
1. Yeah. As a captain, you did fire behavior, extremely important thing, arson awareness, hazmat incident command, fire officer 1, which is another reference to 1021, flammable and combustible liquid emergencies, basically a specialty part of hazmat, principles of building construction, non-combustible buildings. As a chief officer, which would be many levels of chief officers, I guess, you do public safety critical incident management, and then there's the New York State Fire and Mutual Aid resource management. Pretty important thing that most people tend to overlook. How do you deal with mutual aid companies coming in?
Exactly.
Some areas use mutual aid a lot, and
Hmm.
it's just kind of integrated into how they normally run. But a department like this, where you got 4 of your own stations running, mutual aid probably happens, but not as often as it might if you were a
All
standalone
from
station.
the surrounding departments. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and also live fire training evolutions. So that's a critical one.
Maybe like
We've had a
1403.
Yeah, we've done a number of podcasts on live fire training deaths, and they're always tragic and so preventable. So, if you're a safety officer, then you do the National Fire Academy's Incident Safety Officer. I don't remember the standard number on that, Paul. Do you? Anyway,
1521.
okay, yes, that makes sense. Although it may be amalgamated now, I don't know if
Right.
it is. Yeah, but this is back when this occurred. Then there's the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation Courage to be Safe. That's a really brief little online course. It's worth taking, though. It reminds you that you're not invulnerable. Regardless of position, every member is required to take a 10-hour annual Occupational Safety and Health Administration refresher training consisting of 10 topics: general hazard recognition, fire station safety, response safety, fire science safety, protective clothing, SCBA, tools and equipment safety, recent developments in fire safety, if there's been any best practices changes, sexual harassment and violence in the workplace, and bloodborne pathogens. Pretty basic stuff.
All good
All
stuff to be
interior fire.
refreshed on, though. Like, that's good stuff
Yeah,
to take every once in a while. It's
yeah, yeah. All interior firefighters are required to attend an annual bailout refresher course.
awesome.
Good. Ties very much in with your that course we were talking about earlier about firefighter survival and bailout, right? It's being refreshed on that annually is a really good thing. Additionally, all members are required to attend training drills at least twice a month in their fire company. That's a minimum in my mind. We used to
Hmm.
go 4 times a month, and they were not short. We started at 6:30 and we wrapped at 11. Um, the fire department holds 4 drill nights each month, 3 drills that each fire company trains individually, and 1 drill that all fire companies train together at one of the 4 firehouses. So that's good
Nice.
too, because you can often get quite disconnected if you never get to work with your other guys.
We used to do that
So
in Clearwater. We used to make 2 stations train together once a month.
right,
Just their closest neighboring station. One was 2 and one was 3. Yeah.
right. Well, obviously, if a particular station has a particular focus, like FAST or RIT or something like that,
Right.
you've got to integrate that in with the rest of the operational style stations. It's just, you need to be able to recognize skills and
Yeah.
knowledge and even just the basis.
How often do you actually train with your mutual aid partners? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you got separate stations, it's not mutual aid, but it's almost that in a way.
Right.
Anyway, so the deceased volunteer firefighter who was operating on tanker 17 Delta joined the fire department as a volunteer fighter in 2005. So had what? I'm sorry, I lost track of when this incident was.
2021.
Right. So 2021. So he'd been on for what, 15 years
Yep.
basically. He served on an engine company and was a fire officer for 3 years. He was a second lieutenant and then a first lieutenant. So he was not a fire officer at the time of this incident. Remember, officers were voted in and out. So the volunteer firefighter had attended multiple training courses in fireground strategy and tactics, fire apparatus operations, firefighter safety, building construction, technical rescue, and other fire officer development. His total training hours was 434 over some 46 courses. So that's a
Wow.
pretty good record of trainings.
Knowledgeable. Yep.
So, yeah, knowledgeable guy you'd 15 years should be really hitting his stride.
Yep.
So the IC, who was designated Chief 17-1, had over 22 years of total firefighting experience, so a little more than the victim, all at this particular fire department. He was a fourth generation volunteer firefighter and had served in all fire officer positions before becoming chief of the department in 2021. These multi-generation family fire departments, very common in the Northeast.
Yep.
I suspect common in the South also. I don't know about the West,
Yeah.
Paul. If you see
Common
that.
West as well. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a good thing. They usually
It's a
start as
family
junior
thing.
firefighters. Yeah, get exposed as children, and once you get the hooks into you, you're there, buddy.
Yeah, like you and I did. Yep.
Yeah, not like us. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
of course it was. He was a fourth generation volunteer firefighter and had served in all fire officer positions before he became chief of the department in 2021. So, pretty close to the time of the incident. He was the fire chief of the fire department 17 at the time of the incident. His training included various courses on fireground strategy and tactics, incident management system, special operations, firefighter safety, building construction, technical rescue, fire administration, and fire officer development. His training totaled 472 hours, and he had taken 61 courses at that time.
Yeah, so two very knowledgeable people
these
that
are
are involved
not
in
new.
this incident. Apparatus staffing and communications. So Fire Department 17 responded with Tanker 17 with a crew of 5 and Chief 17-1 on the initial alarm to an assisted living facility. As command requested additional resources throughout the incident, 17 tower and several pumpers were staffed and responded. The volunteer fire department requires each piece of apparatus that responds to have a minimum staffing of 1 officer and 3 firefighters. Yay! Applause for that. Minimum staffing, even in a volunteer department. Good for them. The County 911 and Dispatch Center is a division of the Sheriff's Office. The Communication Division dispatches fire, EMS, state law enforcement, etc. They answered in 2021 over 200 and almost 270,000 calls and dispatched 25,000 emergency incidents.
So we're going to talk a little bit about building construction. So the building involved, as we'd already mentioned, was a care home. So the New York State Department of Health records indicate that the facility maintained an operating license as an assisted living facility. So you can have different names for these facilities depending on your jurisdiction. But assisted living basically means that the residents in there were not capable of looking after themselves completely anyways. So the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, Fire Protection Handbook. Don't know how many of you are familiar with the handbook. It's a great big volume, worth reading, lots of little tidbits in there. Anyway, it notes that the term assisted living facility is often used to describe a type of residential board and care occupancy. This type of facility is used for lodging 4 or more occupants for the purpose of providing personal care services, including assistance with activities of daily living, such as help with nutrition, bathing, dressing, and toileting. So, of course, they would have kitchen facilities and recreational facilities and dorm facilities and all of that kind of stuff. So at the time of the fire, which, by the way, was on a Tuesday, the assisted living facility had 4 staff members on duty who cared for 113 occupants. 4 staff members for 113 occupants. It's a pretty high patient to staff number.
Ratio,
ratio. Who included both ambulatory and non-ambulatory patients. So non-ambulatory means they were not able or would not have been able to get out of the building on their own in case of an Emergency. I'll tell you from my personal experience of responding to these types of facilities, that is a big issue.
Yep.
Um, and can have and the building construction can have a major impact on that too. Is it one floor? Is it two floors? Is it three floors? Is it four floors? Every time you add a floor, it doesn't get twice as difficult. It gets way more than
And
that.
then if there's stairways and stuff like that, in addition,
Yeah,
even just
yeah,
outside. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I remember an incident we had in a five-story 1960s era apartment complex, and it was mostly occupied by seniors, and a
Yep.
significant number were non-ambulatory. We had a fire in the basement. It was a transformer. It created a huge mess throughout the building. We did contain the fire, but the smoke went everywhere.
Yeah.
You write your name on the walls on the fifth floor, and quite
Yeah.
a number of people who lived there could not get out because they couldn't take the elevators and they were incapable of taking the stairs.
Yeah. If you're
So
firefighters or fire chiefs listening to this podcast, if you have less nice or older rundown apartment buildings in your community where typically the rent would be the lowest, you will find seniors in that building or disabled people in that building that are not in a care home, but they're in the cheapest place they can find to live on their pensions. And you're going to have a challenge when there's an emergency to get them out of the building. I found that over and over and over in our apartment buildings here, even in tiny little Lacombe or in Rocky Mountain House where I worked, or in Fort Saskatchewan. Those lower rent apartment buildings are full of people that are not ambulatory.
yeah, and if you do the math, I mean, you consider also that when seniors are involved, seniors tend to have reduced mobility, and some of them, in fact, as you get more senior, you tend to get more overweight, and you also tend to get less physically able. So, how many firefighters would it take to get a 200 or 300 pound man down 5 flights of stairs in a 50, 60-year-old building? How many firefighters do you think that would take? Well, you could take two of you to do that, but you're probably not going to make it all the way down. So you're talking three or four. And if you don't have the right equipment, like stair stretchers and that kind of thing, if you don't have all of that, then you're not going to be able to get this person out. And that's one person.
In an
That
emergency,
isn't
you're going to grab a kitchen chair or something. That's all you're going to
yeah,
have.
right. That isn't the 25 that live on the floor, of which maybe a third of them are non-ambulatory, and the rest of them still need assistance anyways. So these are massive staffing incidents. They
Yep.
really are.
Call
And
lots of mutual aid.
yeah, sure, for sure. Anyway, per facility protocol, some occupants were sedated by medication overnight. So that just adds to the fun. So the original facility buildings were built in the early 1920s as a local hotel and resort. It's getting better and better, Paul. Multiple additions and renovations were undertaken at the facility with various building construction materials used. The reason I said code was 1920 is pre any
There was no
national code.
code. Yeah.
There might have been some local
Look.
ordinances at the time,
Yep. Yep.
but they would not, most of those would not qualify for what we would currently consider to be fire safety. You could have open stairways from the lobby all the way up through, and balconies around an atrium in the middle. You could have all of that stuff. It's possible. I don't know about this building.
You'll learn more.
Yeah, I know. However, records of these renovations and the original building construction were limited or non-existent. That's not unusual either. This includes the overall plot plan of the facility and dimensions of the building. The original set of buildings were wood frame, type 5, in other words, of building construction.
According to interviews conducted by NIOSH investigators, the Fire Department 17 was routinely called to this facility for false alarms, including those caused by occupants who had smoking or cooking mishaps. Firefighters had familiarity with the various facility buildings.
I can remember incidents in buildings like that, and we had people living in those buildings who had some mental competency issues, and they'd go and pull the fire alarm. They, in their mind, there was something serious going on, or they weren't happy with their meal or something. They'd go pull the fire alarm, and we'd end up there.
Or they might have had their own kitchenettes and they burned food on the stove or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you can easily go to these buildings multiple times a year. And what does that build in you as a firefighter? It creates a sense of complacency, is what it does.
Unfortunately. Yep.
which can kill you, unfortunately. Anyway, the original facility consisted of a 3-story residential building with kitchens, officers, and a dining room. There was a swimming pool in the basement of the 3-story residential building, but it was non-functional. It is unknown when the hotel and resort closed and it became an assisted living facility. The 2.5-story and 2-story buildings that were also on the site were added later. There was a firewall between the 2.5-story and the 2-story building, which in this case prevented fire spread between the two buildings.
According to state investigation documents and interviews, the 3-story residential building maintained a fire suppression sprinkler system in the kitchen and dining area and hallway. During the incident, the sprinkler system was activated but ineffective because fire extended into the wall behind appliances and into the ceiling and roof of the dairy kitchen and above the sprinkler systems. The reason they have different kitchens, dairy kitchen and the regular kitchen, is because this was an Orthodox Jewish building, and therefore there were certain food preparation practices that had to be followed. So they had some separate kitchens.
Yeah. It's also good to remind folks that sprinklers are occupancy sprinklers, right? Yeah, so they sprinkle really are only effective inside the room unless they're
And
special
this is only
hazard sprinklers.
hallway,
Yeah,
kitchen, and dining area. So
yeah,
old code, like the Vandalia fire, where the sprinkler system was unfortunately turned off in the hallways. No one knew that, but anyway, it's only in the common areas where they have a sprinkler and the kitchen where the risk is.
yeah.
The
But
suites don't have it.
even if it had been fully sprinklered, once the fire gets into the structure, the sprinklers much reduced efficiency
Yeah,
because there's no sprinklers in the structure itself,
right. Yeah,
unless it was specifically built that way.
yeah. Personal PPE or protective equipment, the gear, a NIOSH approved SCBA, they were destroyed in the fire when the building collapsed. So they couldn't really get an evaluation on the PPE. With all the training, I'm assuming that they probably had nice PPE because they were obviously serious about the job they were doing in this instance. The weather at 1 o'clock in the morning on March 23rd, 2021, it was 37 degrees Fahrenheit, so just above freezing for our Canadian friends. Dew point was 34 Fahrenheit. The humidity was 89%, so it was moist or damp out, and the wind was out of the northwest at 5, so the conditions were fair. Virtual 360. So upon arrival, the firefighters would have found a very large, I cannot overemphasize the layout of this building. You'll have to look at the maps and pictures on our social feeds. It was different buildings, approximately 300 feet or 100 meters long, all connected together. These buildings were set back from the street about 100 feet or 30 meters on the Alpha side, and there was a parking lot in front of the doors for about 30 cars and a turnaround driveway that also went under a small carport entrance so people could be dropped off or picked up without being exposed to the elements directly, a bit of a roof over it. The buildings varied from the original 3-story house on the Bravo end, connected with a single building about 30 feet wide onto a 3-story motel. My assumption is that the house was there and the hotel were there, and when it got bought out to be a nursing home, they merged the two. So the motel type structure, which is about 100 feet or 30 meters wide, and the single floor one that joins the two is about 30 feet wide or 100 feet wide. It has a flat roof with, on the delta end of the 3-story structure, which was the apartment building, there's an elevator shaft. So there's a house, there's a low single-story building, and then there's a 3-story building, which was the hotel with an elevator, and then a 2-story building with a peaked roof was on the end, about 100 feet long, 30 meters, and then another section extending on the delta end, sort of in a T configuration, with a peaked roof the other way. The Bravo end was the single-story connection building between the house and the 3-story motel that extended towards the parking lot with substantial kitchen, heating, ventilation, air conditioning equipment, etc. on the roof. The closest hydrant was on the Alpha side, about 150 feet or 50 meters from the main entrance. The hydrant was red with a white or cream bonnet, so I don't think it was a really great hydrant either. So you have to look at the pictures. It's a very confusing building to figure out. You had a 3-story house, you had a 1-story connector, you had a 3-story sort of old school motel, hotel, and then another 2-story building and another 2-story building on the end. The 2-story buildings remain. The firewall protected them. They're still standing. You can look on Google.
Yeah. If you look at the footprint in the NIOSH report, it's not a nice progressive building from Bravo to Delta. It's little patches of buildings added on. It's kind of corner to corner in some cases and side to side in other cases. And just would be confusing, I think, if it was your first time in there. So now we're going to talk about the investigation. So on March 23rd, 2021 at 00:43 hours, smoke and fire activated the fire alarm system at the assisted living facility. However, no automatic notification was made to the county communications center due to the fire alarm system having been placed in test mode at 17:12 hours on the previous evening. With the fire alarm system in test mode, therefore, no alarm was transmitted to the fire alarm system monitoring agency. And the name of the monitoring agency is 44 Control. When employees heard the fire alarm within the facility, they began to investigate the location of the fire alarm activation. An employee observed smoke coming from the internal dairy kitchen door, so into the hallway. The employee notified other staff to evacuate the occupants and placed a telephone call to 911. At 00:48 hours, which is a few minutes, 5 minutes after the internal alarms, the sprinkler system in the dairy kitchen then activated. The ceiling tiles by that time had melted and started falling onto the floor. Also, there was fire showing in the hallway of the structure that borders the dairy kitchen. And at 00:52 hours, a 911 telephone call was received by the village police department of a fire at the assisted living facility. So there have been 2 calls placed, one to the county fire dispatch and another one to the village police department. Law enforcement was then dispatched to the assisted living facility. 44 Control, which is the fire alarm system, fire dispatch center, alerted the fire department 17 of the fire at the assisted living facility at 00:53. So basically 10 minutes after the alarm system had first sounded.
Yep, 10
at
minutes.
00:50, 10 minutes to go through that process.
Plus response.
Significant delay because there was some time spent trying to figure out what was going on by the staff of the facility. Nobody placed an immediate 911 call because the system had been turned off, and the system would normally have done that. And maybe it took that long before they realized that, in fact, the system was still off. Nobody bothered turning it back on. So I suspect we'll find out more about that later. Anyway, 44 Control alerted the fire department of the fire at the facility at 00:53 hours, again, 10 minutes after the internal alarms. At 00:55 hours, the village law enforcement arrived on scene and reported to their control that heavy black smoke was showing from the side Alpha Bravo corner of the facility. The village law enforcement began to assist staff members with the evacuation of the occupants. At 00:59 hours, village law enforcement on scene reported active fire burning on the roof of the dairy kitchen. So that's pretty quick, even though there was a delay and we don't really know when the fire actually started.
Right. Yeah. So, and this is police. Fire's not there yet, but they've got fire coming through the roof already.
Reported active fire burning on the roof of the dairy kitchen. So we went from a fire in the kitchen that triggered the alarm system, and then 10 minutes later, it finally got to the fire department. But about that time, there was fire through the roof. So obviously a delayed notification on this fire. Fire had been burning for some time and was clearly into the structure, right?
Well, so and the ceiling tiles, because there was a sprinkler system in the kitchen, the ceiling tiles probably didn't need to be fire resistive because there's a sprinkler system. But anyway, the ceiling tiles melted, and therefore it got into the attic space, and therefore through the roof.
Yeah. And what does melted mean exactly, Paul?
Exposed to heat and lost their structural integrity.
Yeah. It suggests to me that they were plastic or something like that. Which
could be. Might not have been to code.
Yeah. Right. Maybe for sanitary reasons. I don't know. Anyway, at approximately 0100 hours, Fire Chief 17-1 arrived on scene at the assisted living facility. Chief 17-1 assumed command and reported a multi-story structure with smoke showing. He reported heavy smoke coming out of the main entrance lobby area, which is Alpha Bravo side, as well as the fire showing on the roof of the kitchen. Command requested Fire Department 6 respond, so that's mutual aid, with Tower 675 additional staffing. So recognizing obviously that there's a lot of inhabitants in this building. 44 Control received a 911 telephone call from an occupant in room 306, so on the third floor, at 0101 hours, reporting that they had smoke in the building. So clearly they had smoke coming into their room. Command advised the county fire dispatcher of heavy fire conditions and trapped occupants at 0102 hours. So pretty quick work there, recognizing that issue within a minute or so of arrival. 44 Control dispatched Fire Department 8, another mutual aid department, to respond with their FAST team, their RIT team, whatever you call it in your department. Fire Department 12 to respond to heavy rescue, another mutual aid department. And Fire Department 7, their own department, to respond with an additional engine company. Due to the report of multiple victims, 44 Control transmitted a request for additional EMS units to respond at 0105 hours. So things are going fast.
Yep.
Been there a few times, and it's a bit of a raises your heart rate, that's for sure.
No kidding.
44-1 responded and was on scene at approximately 0105 hours. He reported to command. At 0108 hours, 44 Control tried to contact the occupants in room 306 who had called them, who still had an open telephone line. The male occupant did not answer. At 0109 hours, Chief 17-1 transferred command to 44-1. Chief 17-1 donned his personal protective equipment and SCBA and went inside the assisted living facility to investigate. Chief 17-1 entered the lobby and observed the sprinkler system activated and heavy smoke, but no visible fire. He then went to the second floor of the facility via the internal stairwell to continue his investigation. At 0110 hours, Chief 17-1 requested that upon arrival, Tanker 17 stretch a 3-inch hose line with a gated Y up the stairwell to the second floor of the facility. So he's not the IC anymore. He's transferred command, but he's still giving orders to incoming apparatus.
Maybe sort of acting as interior officer, maybe?
Yeah, they don't really clarify that, eh?
No.
He also requested crews to bring a high-rise pack to be connected to the gated Y and stretched to the third floor. So we stopped calling those high-rise packs and started calling them standpipe packs, because really what they are is for connecting to standpipes. The height of the building's got nothing to do with it, because this is a 4-story, 3-story building. It's not a high-rise. You could use a pack like that in a low-rise, a mid-rise, or even in a large building like a mall.
Right. Sure.
It's a stand. So a lot of you guys would be calling these standpipe packs. Anyway, so he wanted a Y stretched. He wanted a line stretched from the gated Y on the second floor up to the third floor. So thinking the fire was on the third floor, I guess.
Or needed it to attack, to go down there and search, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Of course, they were saying the fire was on the roof of the kitchen, but the kitchen itself was a low-rise.
That's the single floor. Yeah, that's only a single story. They're in the hotel part to the right, in the center.
So there would be exposure issues, of course. You got a fire on the roof, and you've got the side of the 3-story that's exposed. So I don't know. I'm not sure what he was thinking.
Void spaces are all connected, probably.
Right. So 6EQ, which is a Quint, I assume, arrived on scene and parked on the street behind the assisted living facility near the side Bravo Charlie corner. 6EQ reported that multiple victims were on the fire escape of the 3-story residential building. So there's a fire escape on the Charlie side, I think it is.
Yeah.
The crew from 6EQ began to assist EMS with getting victims off the fire escape and away from the structure. At the same time, Chief 17-1 was dragging a victim to the fire escape on the Bravo side of the second floor. Chief 17-1 acknowledged 6EQ's radio report. The time was approximately 0111 hours. Chief 17-1 requested 44 Control transmit a special call for 4 additional fire departments to respond. The request was due to a significant number of victims that needed to be evacuated from the building. Chief 17-1 also requested all assistant county fire coordinators to be dispatched. He's sure acting like the IC.
Yeah, or interior officer. I'm not sure. They don't really say what he was designated as. There was
Yeah.
2 fire escapes. There was a fire escape on the Bravo end of the 3-story building, which also connected to that house. And then there was another fire escape on the Charlie side of the 3-story, more towards the Delta end of the 3-story. So there's 2 fire escapes
Right.
going on to the Charlie side of the building.
Right. Okay. So 44 Control then received another 911 call from an occupant in room 306, again, 3rd floor, at 01:12 hours. And who noted that he and a female occupant were trapped in room 306. The male occupant stated his room was filling with smoke and they were unable to get off the floor, presumably because of smoke. Unable to get off the floor. Would that be the 3rd floor, Paul, or off the floor of the apartment?
I don't know.
The information was relayed to units on scene that there was a report of 2 victims trapped in 306. I'm guessing they were on the floor to get under the smoke.
Yeah.
From the fire escape, Chief 17-1 walked onto the roof of the dairy kitchen and observed fire where the roof met the 3-story residential building. So definitely exposure on the alpha side of the residential high-rise, or 3-story part, rather. He then returned to the side alpha and assumed command from 44-1. At 01:12 hours, Tanker 17 arrived on scene. Tanker 17's driver began to dry stretch a 5-inch supply line to that hydrant on side alpha. Tanker 17A then assigned himself and Tanker 17E to perform rescue, while Tanker 17C and 17D were assigned to firefighting operations. Tanker 17's crews entered the main entrance lobby via the vestibule on side alpha of the facility. Those assigned to fire suppression stretched a 1 3/4-inch hose line, which was a green hose, to the exterior dairy kitchen door on the alpha side. Tanker 17's driver stretched a 3-inch hose line, which was a purple hose in the drawings, I guess, with a gated Y up the internal stairs to the 2nd floor, which they were then calling the 2nd Division. Crews left the high-rise pack, which was an orange hose in the drawing, in the lobby. When the hydrant was opened and flowing, Tanker 17's intake pressure was only 30 to 40 pounds, so not a lot of residual. Tanker 17's driver placed a 14-foot ground ladder on the alpha side of the dairy kitchen roof, while crews forced the exterior dairy kitchen door. The 1 3/4 line was charged, and Tanker 17C took the hose line into the dairy kitchen roof to try and knock down the fire.
So they've divided their people. They've got people rescuing, and they're trying to make a hit on this fire in the kitchen, which is where it all started, right?
Yeah, everything's a tanker, Paul. What's that about?
I don't know. The at 1:13 hours, law enforcement notified firefighters that the 1st floor was now clear of victims. They also noted that they could no longer enter the building due to the amount of smoke and poor visibility in the lobby. They began evacuations of occupants from the 2.5-story residential building, which was clear of smoke. So that's on the complete other end. That's 100 feet away to the Delta side. At this time, Tanker 17 and Quint 17 were in the driveway on site Alpha. Tower 675 was also on the street of the side Alpha Bravo near the corner. An additional engine from Department 17 was also on the street on Alpha. 6EQ was on the Bravo Charlie corner. Additionally, Mobile Cascade from Department 17 was stationed on the Alpha side. Multiple assistant county fire coordinators arrived on scene, assigned various assignments. These assignments including serving as incident command technician, liaison to the staff of the assisted living facility, liaison to the various utility companies, and division and group supervisors. So they were practicing some sort of incident command, the command technician thing, which is great. That's all stuff we've talked about. They had a big organization building rapidly here. They had a Division Bravo, Division Charlie, Division Delta of the structure to perform ongoing 360-degree size up for Chief 17-1, who had taken command back over from 44-1. At
Quite a few mutual
114,
aid companies too, eh?
yeah. At 114, Engine 7-1 arrived on scene, while 44 Control dispatched all assistant county fire coordinators, EMS coordinators, and fire departments. So they're on this. They're sending all the King's horses and all the King's men. Fire Department 8 arrived on scene, transport 8 MP, a mini pumper, and they assumed the role of fast and staged the resources on the side Alpha. They were requested by Chief 17-1 to disband as fast and perform more rescue of victims, splitting their crews into two interior search teams for second and third floors. So back to, we got to get the people out first, is basically because there's a shortage of firefighters to exactly what you say, carry these people down the stairs.
Yeah, building's secondary.
At the same time,
Firefighting is secondary, except as what you
exactly.
need to protect.
Yeah, and even rescuing firefighters, like right now, we got to get the people out. A member of 6EQ radioed that they would be operating on the Bravo side, second floor of the facility, performing interior search. They found that both fire escape doors on the second and third floor were locked. They forced the door on second floor, and 6EQ's officer assigned the driver to serve as safety officer for their crew. The driver waited at the fire escape door while other 6 Quint firefighters were broken into 2 interior search groups, left and right, on that Charlie side of the building, because it was a motel with rooms on both sides of a center hallway, basically.
And fire escape doors being locked for coming in from the exterior.
Right,
I don't
normal.
think that's not unusual.
Yeah, that's normal. Yeah, you're gonna have to force them in if you can't get in to open them.
Yeah, be panic hardware on the interior.
They noted that smoke was banked down to the floor upon entry in the second floor, so it came over from the from that kitchen area, the single story, or they had another fire, one of the two. Stanker 17's crews and firefighters from Engine 24 also began to perform interior searches. At 1:15, Chief 17-1 requested primary and secondary searches on side Charlie for both second and third floor. At the same time, 6EQ's driver radioed to his crew and requested they exit the structure through the fire escape door Bravo side on the second floor. So at the Bravo end, there was another fire escape there that went down onto the first floor roof. In response, this officer, 6EQ, radioed back and advised the fire was visible on the second floor. So they now had fire in that second floor of the motel part. 6EQ crews then requested a hose line to the second floor. 6EQ's driver advised command to send an engine company and a truck company to the Alpha Bravo corner and provide a hose line to the second floor. At this same time, 9 rescue arrived on scene with 11 firefighters. They staged at the fire escape on the Bravo Charlie corner and were assigned to search that second floor. An urgent radio message occurred at 1:17, requested a hose line to the third floor. Another radio transmission notified command that the natural gas supply had been secured to the building. The 6EQ officer observed fire coming out of the walls on the second floor on the Alpha side. At 1:18, 6EQ's driver attempted to raise the officer on the radio, asking for his location. 6EQ's officer searched the room and noticed the floor was hot and soft. At the same time, interior crews requested a hose line to the third floor be charged. Another radio transmission was requesting Tanker 17, remember they were out on the Alpha side on the supply line, to charge the red hose line. I think they had color-coded hose lines, which is awesome. Firefighters were using this hose line to attack the fire at the exterior dairy kitchen door and then into the dairy kitchen roof. Chief 17-1, whose command, requested Tanker 17 to report where they were operating hose lines at 1:19 hours. 12 rescue arrived on scene with 7 firefighters, so they got trucks coming with lots of guys. They staged at the fire escape on the Bravo Charlie corner. They were assigned to search the third floor. At the same time, 2 6EQ firefighters entered a room facing the Alpha side for a search. They observed the floor was hot and tacky. One of the 6EQ firefighters stayed next to the window while the other firefighter moved back towards the hallway. He noticed that the door frame leading to the hallway was now on fire.
A couple comments, right? We're half an hour into the fire.
Yeah. and they're still evacuating people, searching people and evacuating.
Yeah, it looks like the fire has gone from the one-story dairy kitchen roof into the exterior wall of the three-story former hotel and is running up, burning up, and spreading
And in the common
into the
spaces in the
floors.
floors. Yep.
Yeah, 1920 some era wood frame construction, probably balloon, right, or open. Wouldn't be any fire stops likely.
So they decided to escape through the window and down onto that dairy kitchen roof where it joined up with the center part of the building. At 1:20 hours, 6EQ's driver again attempted to contact 6EQ officer on the radio, asking for his location. 6EQ officer responded that they were outside of the structure. 6EQ officer met Chief 17-1 at the command post to provide an update about conditions on the second floor. Firefighters from Rescue 9 9 Rescue exited the structure via the fire escape from the second floor. 9 Rescue advised the interior conditions were worsening. Command then requested a PAR. At this time, Tanker 17 Charlie, operating on the dairy kitchen roof, broke out windows of the second floor. 2 6EQ firefighters bailed out one of the broken windows onto the dairy kitchen roof. That was the guys we just talked about. Oh no, 6EQ, that's different. They were impinged by fire. Control 44 dispatched fire departments 10 and 19 to stand by at Fire Station 17's firehouses. At 121 hour, 6EQ crews radioed that they were in room 304 and needed assistance removing a victim. Chief 17-1 ordered additional firefighters from the Fire Department 6 to report to room 304. Firefighters from Fire Department 6 entered through the fire escape after forcing the third floor door open and assisted with extricating the victim. They continued to search rooms for victims, noting conditions as hot with zero visibility. At 1:22 hours, firefighters from 6EQ radioed command requesting EMS to meet them on the third floor fire escape. 6EQ was removing the victim from room 304. Chief 17 then radioed at 1:23 asking if the 3-inch hose line was in place. At 1:24, command radioed operations that 44 Control was receiving calls from room 306 again for a trapped victim. Tanker 17 Delta, Tanker 17 Echo, Captain 12, and an assistant. That must be the people. I'm sorry, I missed that. And Assistant Chief 24-2 used the fire escape and interior stairwell to reach room 306. They encountered high heat and poor visibility on the third floor. They could only see the floor from the hallway. Assistant Chief 8-3 stayed on the fire escape to perform accountability. Upon arrival to room 306, Tanker 17D and the Captain 12 pulled the trapped victim into the hallway. Assistant Chief 24-2 and Tanker 17E were in the hallway. The 4 firefighters discussed which way they would exit the structure with the victim. A firefighter attempted to slip webbing around the victim to assist with moving the victim. The firefighter stated that they thought the victim was stuck to the hallway carpet, which was melting, and the victim would not move.
Good Lord. So interesting that most of the issues for rescue are on the third floor, and that the heaviest smoke appeared to be on the third floor. So clearly, once the fire got into the structure at the first floor level, all the heat and smoke traveled very rapidly upwards and infiltrated. So there was very little in the way, I would think, of any kind of smoke barriers, if you will, between the floors.
And there was no firewall or anything between that breezeway or the single story part that joined the old house to the old hotel. It just lots of penetrations there probably.
Yep. Anyway, at 01:27 hours, 6EQ officer radioed operations that searches were completed for the second floor of the facility. Operations then ordered all firefighters still on the second floor to leave as they had no water to fight the fire. So hydrant issues, I guess. While still attempting to rescue the victim from room 306, so at 01:27 hours, 6EQ officer radioed operations that searches had been completed for the second floor of the facility. Operations then ordered all firefighters still on the second floor to leave as they had no water to fight the fire. So they're having hydrant issues, I guess. While still attempting to rescue the victim from room 306, the EOSTI alarm went off for Assistant Chief 24-2.
So that's their end of service life alarm for his SCBA, meaning that it's out of air. So many departments have applications that link the SCBAs to a tablet in a command vehicle that a fire incident technician can use to track air consumption and when someone's out of air, or if a man down goes off, or if heat is too high. So they're complex to use. They're a great system, but they do require training and practice. So they were working, and it was saying that Chief 24-2 was out of air.
Yeah. So that's like a virtual Mayday, right? Hasn't been declared, but essentially it is a Mayday type situation.
Absolutely.
Unless the guy is standing on the sidewalk when it went off, that's possible.
Right.
But this guy, not so much. Anyway, he communicated to the two Tanker 17 firefighters and to Captain 12 that he was then exiting the structure. He was almost out of air, but would have additional firefighters come to the third floor to assist them with the rescue. He exited the hallway using the interior stairwell. At 01:29 hours, Assistant Chief 83 radioed reporting a victim had been found on the third floor and was requesting firefighters to assist with removal. Command responded that a group of assistant county fire coordinators was coming up to the third floor to assist. So they were putting everybody to work. Command then radioed requesting that all units get off the dairy kitchen roof, concerned obviously about the structural stability of that roof. At 01:30 hours, Command radioed all interior companies that conditions are changing. Command and Tanker 17's driver then observed smoke now entering the main entrance lobby. Also, turbulent smoke was observed coming from the exterior dairy kitchen door, which was open. So Assistant Chief 24-2 arrived at the command post. He advised command of the conditions on the third floor and the status of the victim from room 306, the one they were trying to rescue, and they got out as far as the hallway. At 01:31 hours, 44 Control radioed the department had been operating on the scene for 30 minutes. So this is moving quickly. At 01:35 hours, Fire Department 20 then arrived on scene and was assigned the role of FAST. At 01:42 hours, 44 Control dispatched a bus from the County Transportation Department, 4 ambulatory patients from the assisted living facility. Remember, it's the end of March, so it's not summer. It's cool enough, so they're
dark.
bringing.
Yep.
Yeah, and we said it was. So they're bringing in people, bringing in buses as shelters, mobile shelters. You still got to do accountability, right? You got to do a nose count to find out if you got everybody, right? So you don't want them wandering off. So one of the best ways to keep people from wandering off is to bring in a bus and put a Red Cross person in there and be nice to them, and they'll all go in and sit there, and you'll get a chance to talk to them. So that's a good thing. So Fire Department 20 arrived on scene. They were given the role of FAST. A bus from the county came for the ambulatory. Command requested a rep from the local water authority and the American Red Cross to respond to the command post, again, for the people in the bus and other
I just want to give kudos here. Like the city of Edmonton, which is not too far away from me, they are really progressive with this. They have their own municipal disaster people in assistance to Red Cross or whoever you're going to call to help, and they dispatch them right away to any incident impacting victims. And they have trained personnel that go right away in an emergency vehicle. And their motto is no one sitting on the sidewalk. So if your house just burned down or whatever, or had a problem, is we do not want you sitting on the sidewalk. And so they will bring a resource and they will take care of you. And then they work with Red Cross or Salvation Army or whoever to take care of you. So it's a really good program that they have as far as emergency management for municipal regular emergencies. They help with the big ones too, of course.
Yeah. I can endorse that approach. We did the same thing, and it took a while to get all the sinews pulling, to make that happen, but it was super, and we got a lot of accolades for it. People really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of the stress off their shoulders, right? It's hard to sit there and watch all your belongings being potentially destroyed. It's really hard. So I always had a guy that I also sent over, and he was the person you could ask questions of.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing. Anyway, between 01:35 and 01:45 hours, another EOSTI alarm, anyway, low air alarms for Tanker 17D and Tanker 17E, which are two positions on Tanker 17, right, Paul? We just decided those are actually the riding positions. and Captain 12 sounded. So 3 of the people who were working there, their low air alarms went off. So tanker 17E began to pull the victim from 306, room 306, towards the fire escape on the Bravo Charlie corner. Captain 12 crawled towards the fire escape at the same time to gauge the distance to the exit. Also at that time, Captain 12 tried to find another firefighter who might be on the fire escape to assist with the victim removal. So this person is in danger of losing their life, and they're desperately trying to rescue them. While pulling the victim from room 306, 17E ran out of air. He removed his SCBA face piece and pulled his protective hood over his mouth and nose to filter breathe. So as we mentioned earlier, that his low air alarm went off, but he did not exit. So upon taking in his first breath, the smoke felt like he was burning razor blades into his lungs. So his victim would have been suffering from the same thing. So 17E became immobilized in the hallway. So at the same time, which is 0146 hours, 17D called a mayday, noting Mayday room 306. 17E did not call a mayday as he did not want to divert resources from the mayday firefighter.
These guys they got a victim. They're not going to leave them. They're getting the victim out. They need help. And, as long as they're physically able, they're going to keep pulling that victim out, which is...
And in the back of their mind, too, they knew they were pretty close to a fire exit. So I'm thinking they're thinking, we can push the limits on this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the door is just there. I could get to it if I want to.
Your low air alarm goes off, but you got a victim in your arms or dragging them with your lanyard or whatever. Yeah. What are you going to do, right? You're going to keep going. Yeah. The victim obviously doesn't have an SCBA.
Yeah. More than that, of course, if you're on a team and your air goes low, the rule is you all go, right? And so that would leave the victim there all by himself, and they weren't about to do that. So this is what I read into that. I agree with you on that one, Paul.
Yeah.
So 0146 hours command, not knowing who had called the mayday, requested the firefighter calling the mayday to advise his location. Firefighters from 6 EQ were staged at the fire escape, so near there, and saw turbulent black smoke emanating from the third floor fire escape door. Firefighters from fire departments 9 and 24 entered the third floor using the fire escape, while one firefighter stayed at the fire escape door. So help is coming. Additional firefighters from the group of assistant county fire coordinators attempted to reach the third floor using the interior stairwell. So they're at kind of, I think, opposite ends, right, of this hallway. Is that the way I read that, Paul?
Yeah, the stairwell they're opposite sides of the building. One's the alpha side and one's the...
They couldn't enter the third floor hallway due to heavy smoke and high heat. Command ordered all firefighters at 0147 hours to evacuate the building due to these conditions. Evacuation tones were then sounded by the apparatus on their air horns, so that would have made a lot of noise. At 0148 hours, another mayday was transmitted, noting out of air room 306. So this is a repeat of the mayday. Command then requested emergency traffic only. Firefighters from fire departments 9 and 24 worked their way down the hallway and checked rooms on the third floor. So these guys managed to get in where the other crew did not, the coordinators. They were listening for any pass alarms as there was zero visibility. A firefighter from fire department 9 heard, "I am out of air," in a struggling voice, and found 17E. So he's the guy who had lost his air supply and was breathing through his balaclava, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. Not a great way to breathe. Along with firefighters from Fast 24, they then extricated 17E to the fire escape on the Bravo Charlie corner.
So at 1:50 hours, command requested ground ladders be placed on the alpha side of the dairy kitchen roof to reach room 306. So you could be on the roof and then go up to that third floor with a ground ladder. Firefighters from Tanker 17, 6EQ, Fire Department 8, as well as assistant county fire coordinators began to place ladders and attempt to break windows on the third floor. They requested Quint 17 to break third floor windows. At this time, it was discovered that the windows were made of plexiglass and not window glass. If you're looking from the pictures, it actually looks like the hotel had open exterior balconies and then plexiglass over top, but I can't tell from the picture for sure. Firefighters were eventually able to break windows believed to be in room 306. Turbulent black smoke began to come from the window. An assistant county fire coordinator yelled into the room and listened for any possible answer from the Mayday firefighter. At this time, 6 EQ's officer witnessed the floor of the second floor collapse through the broken windows from the dairy kitchen roof. Another radio transmission stated that fire was coming out of the side Charlie windows of the 3-story residential building as Fire Department 19 then arrived on scene. At 0153 hours, command, still not knowing who called the Mayday, radioed to the firefighter calling Mayday, asking for an identifier and location. Fast 24 radioed that they had a Mayday firefighter and were bringing him out. Command acknowledged and asked for the condition of the Mayday firefighter. Fast 24 requested EMS to the side Bravo fire escape to get the Mayday firefighter. As they exited the structure, Captain 12 reached the fire escape door and notified firefighters from Fast 24 and Fire Department 9 that someone is still inside. 2 firefighters from Fire Department 9 then entered the structure to search for the additional person inside the building. Another firefighter stayed at the fire escape door, making noise, pounding on the door to indicate the direction back to the fire escape due to the zero visibility conditions. Command radioed Fast 24 at 1:55 and asked if the Mayday firefighter was out of the structure. Fast 24 said they were trying to get the Mayday firefighter down the fire escape. Command requested all fire departments on scene perform a PAR. At 1:56, 17-6 radioed to command that one firefighter was unaccounted for and missing. Fast 24 then radioed command that the firefighter they extricated, Tanker 17E, was not the firefighter who called the Maydays.
So that's the problem, Paul, when crew integrity gets broken. And crew integrity can get broken if, the firefighters go off in different directions on different tasks. That can happen. You got zero visibility here. You got high heat conditions. But if one of your firefighters goes out of air and goes off air and is then in trouble, you essentially, crew integrity can get broken there too, if the firefighters are not, latched onto each other.
Yeah, and they were working to get that victim out, and one of them ran out of air first, took off his BA. The other guy was still running out of air. He called the Mayday, but somehow they got separated at that point.
Yeah, and neither one could communicate where the other one was because they were in no condition to communicate.
Yeah. At 1:57, crews from Fire Department 17 radioed to command that they were on the dairy kitchen roof with a hose line into the second floor. There was also fire showing from the natural gas line, which was located on the dairy kitchen roof. They requested either a 2.5-inch hose line or a ladder pipe from a truck to hit the kitchen fire. At this time, firefighters from Department 9 found a civilian victim from room 306 and began to move him towards the fire escape on that Bravo Charlie side corner. At 01:58, command requested all units to clear the radio and asked if anyone had seen the missing firefighter from Fire Department 17, Tanker 17 Delta. Fast 24 radioed command that they had lost water to the hose line on the dairy kitchen roof. 01:59 hours, firefighter from Fast 24 radioed that the missing firefighter was Tanker 17D. Fire Department 9 firefighters had the civilian victim from the third floor at the Bravo side Charlie corner. They requested EMS to meet them at the bottom of the fire escape. Command requested that all chiefs on scene to perform a PAR of their individual fire departments. Command radioed Tanker 17D and then requested all units on scene to report if they see Tanker 17D. At 2 o'clock, 0200 hours, Fast 24 made another request for water. Other units were radioed that they were trying to locate a different fire hydrant to establish a water supply. At this point, fire was visible from the second floor fire escape doors and windows. Firefighters from Fire Department 9 descended the fire escape with civilian victim from room 306. Firefighters on the dairy kitchen roof were directed to use a hose line to protect the firefighters that were coming down the fire escape. At 2:01 hours, command again requested if anybody on the fireground had seen Tanker 17 Delta. 44 Control radioed command that all fire departments have been operating on scene for 60 minutes. At 0204, units radio that they were still trying to establish water from the hydrant as 17-4 reported to Chief 17-1, the second floor had collapsed. At Tanker 17A, is thrown from the collapsing dairy kitchen roof and subsequently transported to a local hospital for medical treatment. 2:05, Fire Department 15 arrives on scene. Control advised the following fire departments were on scene: 17, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 19, 20, 24, 25, 13, and 15. Command acknowledged and advised that one firefighter is unaccounted for and missing. At 027 hours, an urgent call was made for a major collapse on side Bravo and Charlie of the facility. A cantilever collapse was witnessed with part of side Charlie of the structure remaining standing. At 2:10, command requested all chiefs on scene prepare a par again. 2 minutes later, fire departments, a whole bunch of them, advised that the command, their crews had completed a par check with all members accounted for, except for 17. The local water authority notified 44 Control that they had boosted water pressure and would be sending a supervisor to the scene within an hour. Firefighters on scene utilized 3,500 feet of 5-inch supply line and 3 relay engines to establish a secured water supply for fire suppression operations. Once a secured water supply was established, command advised all departments and resources at the assisted living facility that the strategy was changing to defensive. The IAP was to utilize master streams, get firefighters to rehab, determine the need for heavy equipment to assist in controlling the fire and locating Tanker 17 Delta. The time was approximately 2:17 hours. So an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, these guys have been working hard.
Yes.
There's
And they
a
still
lot
have
of
all these victims from the home.
right. So I mean, you're an hour 20 minutes into the call, or hour 15 minutes into the call.
Yeah.
You're bagged. You'd have been on your third air pack bottle at least, right?
Yep.
Some of these guys.
You've been up all day at your normal job. You just got this after
Yeah.
you got to sleep, right?
Yeah, there wouldn't have been a lot of gas left in the tank, I'll tell you.
At 1000 hours, command advised the county fire dispatcher that the fire at the assisted living facility was under control. They started rotating fire departments off the fire ground. Heavy equipment was on scene, pulling the main fire building down to locate pockets of fire throughout the day.
So this is 9 hours after the fire started, just in case you didn't catch that.
Command requested a state urban search and rescue team, which included cadaver dogs, to help locate Tanker 17D. Divers were deployed into the swimming pool of the basement. So there's an extra complexity factor that you never thought of, was the swimming pool, of course, would fill with water. To search for Tanker Delta, while drones were deployed for an aerial view. At 2100 hours, command advised 44 Control that the fire was out. At 2350, members of the state urban search and rescue team located Tanker 17 Delta. Tanker 17 Delta was located in the basement of the facility. An area where Tanker 17 Delta was located would be in relation to room 306 and how the building had shifted during the collapse. At 020 hours on March 24th, investigators from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner pronounced Tanker 17 Delta deceased and documented his location. At 0140 hours, Tanker 17 Delta was removed from the structure and transported to the County Office of Medical Examiner facility, and command advised that all fire units were cleared from the scene at 1607. In total, all 113 occupants and 4 staff members were rescued from the structure. One occupant was pronounced deceased, the male victim from room 306, upon arrival at a local hospital. Multiple occupants from the assisted living facility were treated and transported for various injuries. 2 firefighters were injured and transported to local hospitals for treatment. Over 40 other firefighters sustained injuries which were treated on scene. Of the 26 departments in the county, 25 were involved in this incident, as well as fire departments from New Jersey. The incident response lasted over 40 hours. Following the termination of Incident 44-1, activated Critical Incident Stress Management Team response to provide mental health services to the firefighters and other first responders that were involved in this incident.
Wow, the supreme irony that the firefighter who died in this was trying to rescue the victim who was deceased.
Yeah. But what do, right? You're in the smoke, in the heat, you're going to keep dragging on the guy. Is he unconscious? Is he passed away? We
Yeah.
don't know.
Too bad he didn't survive. That would have been, a little
Yeah.
bit of a,
Reward.
yeah, I guess that's the word. Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the origin and cause of the fire. So, the New York State Division of Homeland Security Emergency Services, Office of the Fire Prevention and Control, OFPC, Office of Fire Prevention and Control, led the investigation in determining the origin and cause and circumstances, of course, of the fire at the assisted living facility. The investigative report by OFPC stated that the fire had originated in the dairy kitchen in the one-story kitchen area. So this dairy kitchen, again, is one story, and it's on the alpha side, and directly behind it is the 3-story where all the drama took place, where the fire spread into. The assisted living facility hired 2 individuals to perform a cultural cleansing practice on March 22nd, which was the day before. The OFPC investigation report stated that these individuals directed the assisted living facility staff to call the county's communication center at 1712 hours on March 22nd, which is the evening before the fire. This was to place the fire alarm system in test mode in order to avoid a false activation. So clearly there was going to be smoke. It is unknown if the staff assigned a fire watch in the facility due to the fire alarm system being offline. With the fire alarm system having been placed in test mode, the fire alarm system could not send an emergency notification to the monitoring facility, which was located at 44 Control. So this led to a delay, of course, in 44 Control receiving the alarm. I think we noted earlier it was a 10-minute delay getting to the fire department. So in the evening of February 27, the individuals who had been hired to do this cultural cleansing used a propane torch and hot charcoal between 2100 and 23 hours for a 2-hour period. These items were used to heat metal kitchen appliances such as the sink, the griddle, and a pot warmer. The torch from the heat was then transferred from the appliances into the wall, causing fire in the building materials. So they heated these appliances so much that the heat transferred into the wall materials of this very old building and set the building on fire. So you would have had a concealed fire in the void spaces behind the counters. The fire then extended up the wall behind the appliances and into the ceiling and roof of the dairy kitchen, which placed the fire above the sprinkler system. So you can see how that could happen.
Yep.
It's not all that different from what can happen in a residential kitchen fire, where you get like a fire in the cupboards. We've had these where you had fires in the cupboards and above the stove or whatever, and the occupant, of course, calls the fire department, but then takes steps to put the fire out in the cupboard. And we've had them where you arrive on scene and say, "Yeah, we had a minor fire in the cupboards, and we dealt with it." Well, it wasn't. We went inside.
It was hidden. Yep.
You still had a very nice fire burning. Thank you very much. It was in the structure itself. Anyway, the cause of death that the medical examiner determined of the firefighter 17D was smoke and fire inhalation injuries and burns to the entirety of the body resulting from working as a firefighter in a structure fire. It's probably likely that it was the smoke and the other toxins
heat,
that would have killed him first before the fire actually got to him. So
recommendations for this, because this is why we do these, is to learn from them. Recommendation number 1, develop pre-incident plans for high-risk occupancies, including low-frequency, high-risk scenarios such as assisted living facility that is supported by national standards. At this incident, the fire department had a program to conduct pre-incident inspections. The department had not conducted formal pre-incident inspection of this facility or developed a formal pre-incident plan. Also, there was a delay in dispatching additional fire departments, which contributed to a lack of on-scene available staffing and dedicated fast companies. Pre-incident planning for the occupancy in this incident may have allowed for a greater number of fire departments to be added to the initial dispatch assignment when the incident was confirmed to be a working structure fire, right? Call lots of mutual aid. You should have a plan that if it's a nursing home, you're calling everybody from the area to come. You're going to need, because you have to get all the people out and fight the fire.
Yeah. So, really, I would say that what you want to plan for is auto aid. But the
Yes,
challenge here, of course, is they have multiple false alarms at this facility, as we'd indicated earlier. And auto aid doesn't work well with multiple false alarms. So
right.
you need to somehow do one of two things. You either semi-auto aid, whereby when the fire is confirmed to be a fire, that happens
Yeah,
without necessarily thinking about it. So as soon as the words come out of the on scene report, smoke showing, fire showing, then the dispatchers know, bingo, right away, the aid departments. Or you deal with the false alarms in an effective manner and go back to a standard auto aid. So it's difficult. I can see that, but why they didn't pre-pan this facility? What else in their community had a greater risk? You have to ask yourself that
exactly.
that that focused their attention other than this.
Because many fire departments are unable to pre-plan for all the structures within your jurisdiction. That's common. You just can't get to them all. You may
No, you
opt to
can't.
prioritize plans for structures that have an elevated or unusual fire hazards and life safety considerations. Strategies and tactics employed at an emergency incident need to match the structure. Pre-plan information can help ensure residential fire tactics are not applied at commercial structures. There's many components that must be in place to deal with a fire at an assisted living facility, which we've talked about already, including pre-incident planning, strategy, tactics, recommendations listed in the investigation report provide methodical processes for fire departments to effectively command and control an incident such as a fire at assisted living facilities. So, yeah, this is this. If there's going to be if you're going to prioritize things, it's probably going to be the assisted living. I mean, it's almost a higher priority than a school because at a school, the kids they're mobile, they can move, you can direct them. At an assisted living facility or those older apartment buildings that I was talking about before, those are your high risk, low frequency events.
Yeah. And obviously, one of the pre-planning misses here was water supply.
Yeah,
Um,
no water.
they called eventually for the water department to deal with it. And I mean, I say eventually, an awful lot happened in the first half hour here.
Yeah.
But they were talking about a water supervisor being an hour away and really only a single hydrant. And they had to go 3,500 feet with a triple relay just to establish a secure water supply. And why wasn't all that planned out beforehand and put into place as soon as there was? Do you need to wait till your residual goes to zero before you realize there's going to be an issue? Um, Pre-planning, testing of the hydrants, checking your water reports, because your city water department is supposed to be testing those things annually. All of these things should have been part of it, and clearly, lack of water was a major factor here because the fast team couldn't get water to make entry to the hall to
Hmm.
rescue the Mayday firefighters.
Right.
So
They couldn't.
did that contribute to them not arriving and rescuing that firefighter on time? Probably
Yeah.
yes.
There's no way to help them.
No. Well, yeah, we're good, but we're not fireproof. Recommendation 2, ensure that company officers and firefighters maintain crew integrity when operating in the hazard zone. At this incident, firefighters from multiple fire departments entered the structure to conduct searches and to rescue victims. When search crews of 2 firefighters would find a victim, one of the firefighters exited the structure with the victim while the other firefighter remained in the structure to continue the search. The remaining firefighter then joined firefighters from other search crews whose members exited the structure with victims. I'm not particularly familiar with that procedure. That's a new one for me.
Yeah, I mean, you stay here and continue searching. I'll take this person out. No, we're both going to take the person out and we're going to come back in, or the command sends another team in to take off where we left off.
Yeah, yeah. So, crew integrity is essential to fireground accountability. Fire departments should have a personal accountability procedure and guideline in place to track both crews and the individuals on the crews. So, it's enough to say that your second division, you know, tanker 17, but also each individual that's part of that crew, so that you know that if the crew goes missing, who you're looking for, or whatever. A fire department's personal accountability system should have the capabilities to track and identify who is operating the hazard zone, what their assignments are, and their locations. The collection of personal accountability tags or passports, different names for them, uh, when placed on the apparatus, will not assist in maintaining awareness of fireground locations. That just tells you who rode in. It doesn't tell you who is where. You need what's
Yeah.
called entry control. We've talked about
Well,
this before.
well, Britain has extremely sophisticated entry control procedures for accountability, but yet we've covered on this podcast actually two incidents, the one in Manchester and the one in Shirley Towers, where the accountability officer wasn't able to keep track of everybody because of factors on the scene, the type of the structure and that kind of stuff, and the layout, and people that were assigned by different officers and stuff. And so, but
Yeah,
you need to have it anyway. It would have helped because they
yeah,
didn't know who was lost where.
yeah,
You need to do
yeah,
more than just the
yeah,
tags on the truck.
yeah. So when I was the fire chief in Niagara and the fire coordinator, we have a dozen departments, 500,000 people that we were protecting, and we did a lot of work on mutual aid plans and a lot of work on accountability. And we developed this system, and it wasn't my idea particularly, but it came out of consultation amongst the chiefs and working groups. Um, that accountability does not have to be one location. If you design it properly, and you've got a building or a complex of buildings, really, like in this case, you may need to have an accountability on the Alpha side. You may need to have an accountability on the Charlie side, but you need to basically have those two accountability systems integrated. There needs to be a safety officer that's in charge of accountability, and you need to have a system that works. So if the firefighter goes in one side and comes out the other side, he's accounted for. He doesn't just disappear and everybody wonders, if he came out the other side. So you need to have a system that can foresee this incident, if you will. It's not that hard to foresee an incident like this happening. So you need to work on that.
But we get complacent with the day-to-day house fire, car fire,
Yeah.
medical calls. We
Yeah.
don't plan for the nursing home or the apartment building
Yeah.
or the train
Yeah.
station or
Yeah.
whatever it happens to be,
Yeah.
fire, where we're going to call in every department.
Yeah. As you read earlier, low frequency, high hazard.
Yeah.
We don't have these fires every day, and when they do, they can go badly wrong if you haven't worked out how you're going to deal with them and practice them.
But these
So,
incidents are why the fire
yeah,
departments are as large and as funded as they are. It's for
yeah.
these bad days.
Nobody cares about your BMW on fire on the I-75. Really, nobody does.
Right.
Well, you might.
Yeah.
So it is the responsibility of every firefighter and company officer, as recommendation 2 continues to say, to always stay in communications with and or contact with their crew members by visual observation, by voice, in other words, you're within easy hearing distance, or by touch, like you're latched onto his SCBA arm or something like that, while operating in the hazard zone. All firefighters should maintain the unity of command by operating under the direction of their company officer. The ultimate responsibility for crew integrity and ensuring no members get separated or lost rests with the company officer. I can't emphasize that enough. And if you're not a company officer because you're in a volunteer department and there's 3 of you ride the truck and you're all black hats, well, one of you is going to have to take on the role of company officer and work as the crew chief, if you will. You don't have to have a fancy colored hat to be your company officer in this case. You just need to be in charge of the crew. The ultimate responsibility for crew integrity and ensuring no members get lost or separated rests with the company officer. A Mayday should be called if any member cannot be accounted for during a personal accountability report. One component of an incident management system is to provide a rapid determination of whether any responders are missing, if an area is required to be evacuated, or there's a structural collapse, or there's other unplanned event should occur. A PAR, in other words, needs to be done quickly and effectively.
Recommendation number 3 was using a functional personnel accountability system requiring designated accountability officer and or a resource status officer. So basically, we talked about this. Discussion during the incident. Fire departments from multiple departments and apparatus entered the structure to conduct searches and rescue victims. Accountability tag system was in place, but only on some apparatus. So not even all the apparatus had tags, and really you need it at the door where they're going in, on each floor, etc. That's why you establish sector officers. That's why you have accountability officers. That's why you have those individual crew officers. So It just reiterates here the same. I'm not going to read it all in the essence of time. But as the incident escalates, resource status should be placed under planning section. Follow your incident command system. This function is separate from the role of the incident commander. Incident commander is responsible for the overall command and control of the incident. Because of the importance of responders' safety, size and complexity of the incident should help determine resource status assignments. Properly initiated and enforced personnel accountability system enhances firefighter safety and survival. This is 2021 that this happened.
Yeah, 1991.
Right.
And we were doing accountability in 1991. So it's
with
particularly
cow tags.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Moo.
We had them too.
Yeah, it's particularly important when you have multiple mutual aid forces on scene. And if you're in a county mutual aid system, you should all be doing it the same way.
Yes.
And it sounds like, in fact, they have gone some distance. That, I mean, Fire Department 17, Fire Department 8, Fire Department 10. So you all have your individual identities, and there's a reason for that. It's not just the trucks; it's also the accountability system.
Too bad Doug's not here. Him and I tried to get the county that we were in, Lacombe County, to adopt station numbering so that we could number all the engines and rescues and tankers differently, and it fell flat on its face because everybody wanted station 51 or whatever. So I don't care what the number is, but each station should have a different number on the truck so that I don't say Lacombe Pumper, I can say engine 22, and we know that that comes from station 20. But anyway, recommendation number 4, and this really gets to the meat of the matter as well: ensure ICS general staff functions are expanded during type 4 incidents when they extend into multiple operational periods. This is big. You have hundreds of resources there. You have to expand your ICS general staff, safety officer, liaison officer, information officer, planning section, logistics section, etc. At this incident, the initial time of 053 hours concluded at 1600 hours the next day. So not the morning of the 23rd of March, but the next day on the 24th. Incident length was more than 40 hours, extending into multiple operational periods. When this occurs, command must consider how to maintain operations and support firefighter safety and health. Not only is forecasting the direction of the incident vital component, but ensuring staffing, rest, rehab, food, water, personal hygiene, medical care, and specialized equipment that you need to expand incident command system. I teach incident command. It's what it's there for. I have to say that in California, the fires recently, a couple months ago, they did a fantastic job of this. They were on it right away. I listened to the audio on the command channel, and they were taking care of their people. They sectored off, they made divisions, and every division had logistics and everything handled. You got to do it. But these incidents are rare, and so unless you've practiced it, it's not going to happen. Same thing, like number 5, establish divisions, groups. Provide an effective incident management organizational framework for the expansion of the incident action plan. You have to develop your organization at a pace that stays ahead of the tactical deployment of resources. For the incident commander to manage the incident, they must first be able to direct, control, and track the position, function of all resources. Build your ICS organization. And we say this when we're teaching incident command is, go heavy. Appoint those positions. We forget about them because they're management positions, and we think, well, it's a waste. I don't need a planning section chief for an incident that's going to go 12 hours. Yes, I do, because
damn right you do.
Yeah, you need logistics. You need these things. So, base configuration of command includes 3 levels: strategic, so thinking about where is this going; tactical. I would say for a city of 33,000. This is a major emergency. You have 113 residents who are displaced. You have all your emergency services tied up and your neighboring department's emergency services. It's a terrible time for another emergency to happen, which this is when it could happen. And therefore, it's why we have to do this. I won't go too long into all incident command stuff you should be doing. Hopefully you know this already. Everybody listening probably has Incident Command 100. If not, it's like 4 hours. It's easy to take, and that's an introduction to the program.
So if you don't do this properly, like staffing the necessary parts, planning properly, taking charge of the resources when they arrive, there's a couple things can happen. People, when they arrive and aren't given direction and they see an incident, what are they going to do? They're going to run off and do their own thing because they haven't been given any direction. Nobody's paying attention to them. There's a word for that. It's called freelancing. And that gets you into a lot of trouble. Or they're going to stand around because they haven't been given a job and they're going to say, well, I guess we're not needed. We're going home. So that's the other possibility too. And you don't want either one of those things going on.
I want to comment on one thing in here. So, incident command should initially assign division or group responsibilities to a second company officer. If the first due officer has an assignment and is operating at the task level, allow the first company officer to work with his company, focus on the assigned task, prevent task saturation. The second company officer assigned as a division or group supervisor can operate on the tactical level, not the task level, which ensures a broader view of the operation. Another benefit is that companies that are operating with limited staffing, the company officer assigned to the position of division or group supervisor can assign their crew to the initial crew. So engine 17 is on the third floor and engine 18 is coming to help them. Engine 18 officer becomes the sector officer and his guys go work for 17 working on the tasks, attacking, searching, RIT, whatever they happen to be doing, ventilating, forcible entry. But you have that supervision of that area is very important. Then the IC considers assigning chief officers as division or group supervisors once two or more companies are assigned into that division or group. The division or group supervisors operating in or must go to immediately dangerous life situation atmosphere just outside the door is often the great place for the division or group supervisor to operate with another firefighter who can do safety for them and then manage the resources that are in that area. Early establishment of these divisions or groups provides effective incident management organization. Very, very important.
And why do you do this? Because you need to manage your span of control. You cannot have 40 companies working on the scene all talking to the incident commander. It's it, it he's going to pay attention to 5 and the other 35 are not going to get hurt. That's
And
just the reality of it.
it's all good until something goes wrong. So you don't establish all these sectors, divisions, groups, and stuff like that, and accountability, whatever. It's all fine until the fire blows through the roof, or the wall collapses, or you find fire where you don't think it's going to be, and it's in case something goes wrong. You get a mayday, a fire truck goes down. What if they would have lost the one hydrant? They had one truck on that hydrant, So that's why you want to deal with the emergency because otherwise it goes horribly wrong. Baltimore, the 3 firefighters that died when the floor collapsed, everything went horribly wrong and they didn't have a management structure to deal with it. Now, it probably might not have changed the outcome for the firefighters who were killed in a collapse, but it changes the incident for everybody else and makes it go safer and more efficiently. Next one is about command as well. Integrate command safety into incident management system. We probably don't need to go deeply into that. Command safety as part of the 8 functions of command developed, of course, by Chief Alan Brunacini. Recommendations.
Read his books. Get
Read his
get
book.
Fireground Command. Read the book. It's even the original versions of that go back to the 80s.
Yep.
It's still light years ahead of where some of us are operating.
Absolutely.
And if you're only at that level, you're behind.
Number 7, ensure RIC or FAST is dedicated, assigned, and in place before interior firefightings begin and throughout an incident. So in British Columbia, the law is before you assign a second crew to the building or within 10 minutes of the first crew going in, you must have RIT, rapid intervention team established. And it's not a bad deal. In this one here, during the incident, 17-1 radioed 44 control at 2 minutes after 1 to report active fire. They dispatched on the Fire Department 8 for FAST, along with other resources. At 1:14, Fire Department 8 arrived on scene, assumed the role as FAST, staged their resources on the Alpha side. However, because of a lack of resources right away, Chief 17-1 disbanded FAST and performed rescue of victims. Now, you know what? I mean, you need to rescue the victims, so it's a decision. But then right away, it was 20 some minutes later at 01:35 that another department arrived and fast was established. So you need to have that. That's too long to go without your RIT team.
So recommendation 8 is actually a pretty important one, and it goes to internal training, and it also goes to a little bit of how your department operates and what your culture is. And it talks about ensuring that all firefighters and fire officers are trained in fireground survival procedures and Mayday procedures and operations. So at this particular incident, 17D called for Mayday and said they were in room 306. That's not where that firefighter was eventually found. They were eventually found in the basement because the building collapsed. But it was not actually known where the missing firefighter was. They didn't know, because basically what happened is it continued operating until the point where he couldn't operate anymore. Never called a Mayday. His partner called the Mayday. So firefighters need to be trained to recognize, to know when they are in trouble, know how to call for help, and understand how the IC and others need to react to responder in trouble. Having these automated air capacity monitoring tools, I'm not sure what role that played in this. Was it normal to continue operating until somebody told you to get out because your alarm went off? Like, normally they say, half in, half out, right? So you go in with half your tank, you get out with the other half. But, as we already talked about, there was a victim involved. So I think that probably
Threw that
influenced a
out the
lot of
window.
it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But still, the Mayday should, if you got a victim, you're trying to rescue him, you're almost out of air, you should be calling a Mayday at that point.
Yeah.
And you should be confident and comfortable to do that. And it should be an expected thing. And that would have brought the fast team right to you right away, because you would have had the opportunity to say where you were, what was going on. So calling a Mayday is not a simple thing. You don't just do it for the first time at a real fire and hope it all goes well. It won't. Practice, learn it. And further, number 9 says you should have a Mayday tactical worksheet. So if you're working on your regular tactical worksheet, it's not the same as a Mayday. Everything changes. Your priority now is your downed firefighter. It's not rescue. And having it on the flip side, but that tells you a lot, isn't it? The incident is now flipped.
Yeah.
And it's now a Mayday situation.
Yeah. And 10, they did ensure firefighters engaged in emergency operations receive annual proficiency training and evaluation of fireground operations. So they already were doing that, which is good.
Including Mayday, including SCBAs, including all of that stuff. So surprising, they did an awful lot of this stuff. But
they did, yeah. 11, ensure adequate incident scene rehabilitation is established in accordance with NFPA 1584. Got to take care of your people. Obviously, it was a problem on an incident like this. This is going to happen.
Yeah. You don't have time to set people aside. There's too much to do. So you got to call for more.
Water supply, recommendation 12, have SOPs, SOGs to ensure water supply is established during initial fireground operations, especially in areas with limited water pressure. At this incident, the fire department encountered minimal water supply due to both the dead-end water mains and a community water storage tank, which had 750,000 gallons, was out of water. Both these water sources have been depleted due to supplying the sprinkler system at the facility. The water system in the village is privately owned. Firefighters on scene utilized 3,500 feet of 5-inch supply line, 3 relay engines to establish secured water from a hydrant on a 20-inch main for fire suppression operations later in the incident. Yeah. Water supply is critical operations benchmark.
Yeah. So my experience is never trust a private water supply. Always have a plan B and go to it early as opposed to late.
I had this problem here in Lacombe. We have a university. It was a private university on private land until the city kind of annexed it, and they had a bad water system. And we went up there and had lots of issues with water supplies. But I did practices up there, and we had water shuttle practice at the same time as hydrant. And we discovered that, we actually exposed a problem that had to get fixed because they couldn't get enough water, and they were big buildings with students and everything. So you got to pre-plan this stuff. You got to go out there and flow some water, do hydrant testing, critical.
Yeah. But there are worksheets They're available. FUS has worksheets on required water flows, and you can actually sit down and figure out how much water you're going to need, how much the sprinkler system is demanding, figure a fire of a certain size. And in this case, it doesn't look like it was actually a really large fire up to the point where they were having water problems. It was a sprinkler system
Right.
going
They
and
were,
fire in the wall and the floor assemblies, but they couldn't keep up with it. So you need to identify that ahead of hand. And if you got to go 3,500 feet to a major municipal hydrant, that would have been probably pretty early on in the incident. You should have started laying that line and
yeah.
not had those water issues.
Yeah, we had this high school fire here in Lacombe, and the fire penetrated the building in 7 places, and we ran out of water and tried to get more water, and we ran to another what we thought was another loop, but it didn't work. So these things need to be pre-planned for your high risk buildings. 13 recommendation. This is very important. Consider maintaining resources and protocols to address occupational exposure to potentially traumatic events for their members. So, and they did that at the termination of the incident. They activated CISM response to provide mental health resources, to debrief and free sessions, behavioral health specialists, peer support. Very important. This is a traumatic incident. Not only did you lose a firefighter in the incident and you felt powerless to save them, but you had all these residents that you were evacuating from a very traumatic situation.
Plus, it was a
Many
fatal fire on top of
a
all of
fatal
that, right?
fire on top of it. That's right.
Yeah.
And many firefighters interviewed by NIOSH noted they use these resources due to their experiencing initial and ongoing mental health related symptoms and struggles
Yeah.
following this incident.
Yeah. But what we've found around here and really in my other jobs is that it's fine to have CISM and to have those initial contacts, but there needs to be access to follow on mental health care. And that's not always the case. Mental health care that comes a year later is not timely. Recommendation 14, assure that when applicable fire code is not enforced by the fire department, that there's delegated authority shares information with the fire department, which may affect fire department operations. So that sounds a little complex, but we're going to explain that. In this incident, the multiple additions and renovations were undertaken at the assisted living facility using various building construction materials. However, records of these renovations and the original building construction are limited or non-existent. During the fire department's response, things such as replacement of ordinary window glass with plexiglass was discovered. Hampered response to the Mayday. In other words, hampered response to getting into 306 is what they were trying to do. Fire and building code utilization enforcement were conducted by the HJ of the incident, which was not the fire department, likely the building department or a county agency. Although the recommendation inspection frequency for such an occupancy, such as the one in this incident, is annually, fire departments, in cooperation with their AHJ, can perform additional practices to enhance their ability to identify potentially compliance and emergency incident responses. In other words, visit your facilities and see what's going on there. Don't wait for the anniversary to come around. This includes performing monthly fire drills and high occupancy risk classifications. These do not need to be fully executed with evacuations of occupancies. However, they can be limited to ensure that fire alarm systems are functioning, staff are knowledgeable, and the staff. You can quiz the staff. Do they know what to do for evacuation? You get to recognize that there's a high resident to staff ratio and all that kind of stuff. So at night in a lot of these care homes, there's very minimal staffing. And as I mentioned earlier, in Ontario, multiple death incidents. This is one of the things they changed: minimal staffing ratios. So, but anyways, as a fire department, you can take a lot of action involved. Be proactive. Recognize the risks in your community. Do something about it. 15, ensure the water agency and or authority responsible for municipal water supply shares information on hydrant testing and flow capabilities of local fire departments. They normally test every single year and should be able to give you a record. And you should go for records for years and be able to see if a hydrant or a system is depleting in capacity. But a lot of jurisdictions don't do this very well.
In
And a lot of
Alberta,
fire departments don't do it, don't connect with the water department. You got to build those relationships.
In Alberta, most communities, the water department flows the hydrants annually, but they don't test. They flush them. They don't test them annually. It's up to the fire department to do it. And a fire underwriter survey, they want each area of the community done every 5 years. But this is critical information for your officers to know if you have a bad hydrant somewhere or a good hydrant somewhere, because then you can get it fixed.
Yeah, we bought something called hose monsters,
Yeah.
which you could connect to the hose, and they just dissipates all the force coming out. And they have PDOT tubes built right into them, and gauges, and it's very simple. Within a few minutes, you can ascertain. Even if you don't do all the hydrants in town, I mean, if you got 24 hydrants on a 24-inch main that runs down Main Street, you don't have to test them all. You can test one of them, and that'll give you your baseline. Those aren't your problem hydrants. Your problem hydrants are the 6-inch lines, dead ends, limited water supply, private systems. Check the ones that are near the risks that you're concerned about. That's effective use of your time.
Yeah. In this incident, the state actually issued a report to the public service or the water company, but the report wasn't released to the public on inactions or actions of the water company, whether they violated public service law or not.
Now,
But
why wouldn't the report have been released to the public?
I don't know.
I think you can guess.
Yeah.
It wasn't favorable.
Particularly the hydrant located across the street from the assisted living facility began to decrease as they took more water. 16. Operational procedure when cultural cleansing ceremonies with live fire are performed inside a structural facility. So, a discussion here. According to the state office fire marshal investigation, the fire was started when two individuals performed the cultural cleansing practice on March 22nd using hot charcoal and a propane torch to heat appliances and surfaces. It's a cleaning facility, a traditional cleaning procedure to burn off any contaminants on the appliances from hundreds of years ago. The investigation report stated further these individuals directed to the assisted living facility staff to call a county and turn off the alarm system or put it in test so that it wouldn't activate to the call center. The AHJ, the authority, did not have a local ordinance or code that addressed cultural cleansing practices, even though the practice was routinely used in the jurisdiction and surrounding communities because of the high population of this religious group. The practice utilizes direct flame and hot charcoal to heat surfaces on all food residue, so all food residues burned away. Communities surrounding the one in this incident maintain comprehensive local ordinances and codes addressing this practice to ensure life safety. These involve collaboration with fire departments, support the development and use of operational procedures when these practices occur. Some of these practices maintain the following procedures. Fire alarm system is immediately taken out of test mode following the completion of the cultural cleansing practice. A fire watch is placed for the duration of the cleansing practice and or the fire department is present for the duration. Individuals wishing to perform the cultural cleansing practices are required to apply for a permit to do so from the authority having jurisdiction, which includes receiving prerequisite fire prevention training from the fire department, kind of like hot work practices, which they're doing in many agencies now. They're teaching people how to do hot works and how to do it properly. And a fire watch, Boston is mandating it. It's online
This
training.
is hot work
It is.
by
Individually,
definition.
it is. Yep, you're right. Individuals wishing to perform cultural cleansing practices are required to notify the authority having jurisdiction, the fire department, 911, and communications prior to performing the cultural cleansing practice. All they did here was phone them and tell them we're putting our alarm in test mode. So
Yeah.
they didn't
It
get
would have
enough
been useful to
information.
have the fire department there after the process was over and to
Yes.
do a tick scan of the walls to see
Yep.
if there was any heat somewhere where there shouldn't have been.
And then, as we talked about, you need procedures for if you're playing with a fire alarm system. Do you have a fire watch in place?
Yeah.
What's going on? It happens all the time that alarm systems are disabled for various reasons. You
Yeah.
need a system in place, and obviously, they didn't have that.
Yeah, a lot of facilities do not appreciate that when their alarm goes into trouble or goes into test or whatever the case may be. That's something they need to address immediately. It's
Yep,
not something you leave till the guy's in next week. He'll look at it. It's not that at
exactly.
all. And you
Wanted to
can't
take
depend on your poor person on the front desk at midnight to be responsible for that if there's nothing written down.
So, an aftermath article about this fire taken from McKnight Senior Living, which is a seniors magazine. The mother of the volunteer firefighter that was killed in March 2021 at this assisted facility in New York has filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the owners, former employees, city building inspectors, and two rabbis. Defendant's attorney said that while they mourn the loss of the firefighter, Lloyd, they are not responsible in any way for his death. Mr. Lloyd lost his life, and the facility was destroyed not because of anything the defendants did or failed to do, but rather because of historic water pressure issues that hampered the fire department in its response, with tragic results. The deadly fire, which killed Mr. Davenport, Jared Lloyd, Mr. Davenport's son, as well as a resident, allegedly was tied to the Passover practice of torch cleaning ovens. The lawsuit, filed in New York State Supreme Court, argued that the village, its inspectors, the owners and employees of the facility created dangerous, defective, unsafe, hazardous conditions. According to the Rockland Winchester Journal News, Mr. Davenport is seeking undisclosed financial compensation for emotional and psychological loss and punitive damages. The rabbis who reportedly conducted the Passover ritual for years in the region to make commercial kitchens kosher for religious holidays pleaded not guilty to multiple felony charges in connection to the fire, including second-degree manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, fourth-degree arson, second-degree reckless endangerment, and 3 assaults. The rabbis are accused of violating multiple state safety regulations, including not having permits to use torches and requesting that the community's fire alarm system be taken offline during the cleaning. The attorney for the rabbis asked the judge to dismiss the indictments against them. They reached agreements with former employees to resolve their charges, according to media. The 2 testified before the grand jury in the case against the rabbis. They have not been charged criminally. Criminal charges are pending against the building department for filing false reports on fire inspections. Misdemeanor charges and falsifying business records were dismissed. Both have pleaded not guilty to the charges. The national consulting firm, Fire and Life Safety, a former deputy fire chief and fire marshal, told McKnight Senior Living that all senior living communities should follow best practice of having a fire watch policy in place in the event that the fire protection system, like the alarm system, is shut down or compromised. A fire watch, he explained, involved having a dedicated person to conduct rounds and place the building on high alert. Having a robust fire watch policy to accommodate times when fire protection systems are compromised, as we just said, is an essential operational component. Compliance for compliance sake is a mistake. Compliance when it comes to life safety equates to safety and readiness. The reality is, when you circumvent the rules, you cut corners. When you don't comply with life safety fire codes, that's when you're most vulnerable to a fire or some type of loss. We encourage senior living providers to have proactive relationship with the local fire department, who can train staff to provide a more controlled situation in the event of a fire or life safety emergencies. The first time local responders are walking into your building shouldn't be when it's on fire. The 2 rabbis in question avoided jail time after reaching a plea deal for their roles in the 2021 fire. They pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree manslaughter and were sentenced to 5 years of probation for the fire at the Evergreen Home for Adults in Spring Valley. Pleaded guilty to 1 count of reckless endangerment and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. They admitted to recklessly using an illegal blowtorch to clean the facility's kitchen as part of a pre-Passover practice, which caused the fire and partial roof collapse that destroyed the complex and killed the firefighter and one of the residents. The building department head and the fire and chief inspector, as well as an executive from the home, all pleaded not guilty. The resident and volunteer firefighter, of course, were killed. The probation sentences were not well received by the family, Davenport family. This is not justice. How could this happen? How could they get no jail time? They had filed the wrongful deaths. We talked about that already. I'll cut that out. The Firefighters Association of the State of New York also criticized the ruling. Society must send a strong message that irresponsible and illegal behavior will not be tolerated. Laws, fire safety standards, and building codes exist to protect citizens and first responders. Plea deal sent a chilling message to all first responders that their selfless service can be bargained away in pursuit of expeditious legal proceedings for wrongdoers. A long episode, lot of good lessons in there. And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Emergency Traffic. Please give us a like, a thumbs up, and thank you for listening.
Be safe every day.